The first time was a Monday, the second time was a Wednesday. I remember both events. I remember where it was. The second time was like 8 o'clock in the morning. I was going to the Matzah bakery to make matzahs. And a former student had a beeper. And about a stroke. Nun Dalet. You know, it says in Tanya that a Rebbe is forever. It says in Tanya that a Rebbe is forever. This is on you, by the way. I'm charging you for this time. It says in Tanya that a Rebbe is forever. What does it mean forever? It's very simple. As long as it's Chassidim, there's a Rebbe. If you're interested in what a Rebbe has to say, he is your Rebbe be'ela mazeh hagashmi kipshutei. And he for sure provides you with what you need beruchnius, and he even provides you what you need begashmius. It doesn't Tanya. So I learned that Tanya many times. And that Tanya was one of those aha, of course, aha. What was the aha? The Friedrich Rebbe is still our Rebbe. You know why? Because of this Rebbe, that's all. In other words, it says in Tanya, and we all know it, but mamish. Today, I'm sorry to say it, but this is the fact of life. There's so many different, you could, Chazai other you could speak about in a lot of different ways for years, maybe 20 years. I wouldn't talk about it. I avoided Chazai other, I even avoided Chav Chasnissen. It was too painful to me. It was really too hard. And the reason I started to talk is not so much that it's less painful, it's because this is a generation of kids. It's not fair that I have my hang-ups. It's a Chazai Adar is a difficult day. Chav Chasnissen is a difficult day. Gimel Tammuz, Chavei Shvat. Also, these are very, very hard days. It's very hard to paint them in a positive light. So, I mean, talking about Chazai Adar, one of the themes which dominates the day is Mashiach, because the whole koch of the Rebbe in the months leading up to Chazai Adar was Hine Zeh Melech HaMashiach Bo. I mean, you don't remember this, but I remember the Rebbe saying again and again and again, Men sitzt schon beim Tisch mit Mashiach Tzidkenu. We're already sitting at the table with the Mashiach Tzidkenu. Und da ist the Sheir Abar, and da ist the Yain HaMeshumer, and da ist the whatever it is, the Lechem Panog. The wine and the meat and the bread and the Suda Mashiach is already, it's a whole, the Shulchan Aruch is all ready and willing, it's as da. Not for then, that's effen and Eugen. So this was, I mean, I heard all of these sichos, but without giving Chazai Adar its due time, because I don't want to talk about Chazai Adar, you had a small class on Chazai Adar, it cost me 15 minutes of Tanya. If anybody thought that this that says in Tanya that Rebbe is forever is a philosophy, we know now how not the philosophy it is. It's such a reality. But the more you mizboinen, the more you think about it, there's just so much example, so many anecdotes to support this. Obviously, the world is till Mashiach comes, the world is a mix of good and bad. And some of us are in situations where we see a lot of bad, that we get caught up in the bad. But if we can raise your head out of the darkness for a minute, Elie Wiesel, the famous writer Elie Wiesel, who was very close to the Rebbe, said he was so inspired from the Rebbe. He was so overwhelmed by the Rebbe. He's one of the few people who said that he saw more in the Rebbe by a Fabrengen than in a Yechidus. When the Rebbe sat in Fabrengen, he came to 770. He was a writer. He was a sensitive man. When the Rebbe sat in Fabrengen, they're talking to the early 60s, he says, you saw the tzaris of the whole Klal Yisrael on his face. That's what he said. But the Rebbe Fabrengen, this is what his experience was. You saw a Yiddish sitting, and he's carrying the pain of the whole Jewish nation. That's how he felt. Elie Wiesel. So Elie Wiesel said that one of the great geniuses of the Rebbe is not only he got people to go on shlichus, he knew who to send where. The Rebbe set up which person should go on which shlichus. You have no idea how true this is right now. The Rebbe Arbet Meisim, he moves pieces of the puzzle. The Rebbe has people. We are the Rebbe's people. We're lucky, by the way. We're born here. We're the Rebbe's people. And he uses us like chess pieces. We have all of our plans. Everybody in this room's got a plan, how they want to live, how from they want to be, how Chassidish they want to be, where they're going to live, who they're going to marry, and all the rest. The Rebbe's got a plan also. And he's cool about it, He doesn't make a lot of noise. He doesn't come and say, okay, I'm going to make you do this. He blows the wind and the pawn moves just a little bit to the right, and then something else happens, and something else happens. And he puts each one of us in the place we need to be, that not only we could best serve him, but we could best fulfill the koiches that the Eibishter gave us. It's a pele. You're going to get married, and whether you're going to be officially a shliach or not officially a shliach, there's 3 levels of Lubavitcher. There's shluchim, there's chinuch people, and then there's everybody else. Whichever group you're going to go into, you are going to serve the Rebbe, and the Rebbe is going to make the arrangements. You're going to do the work, but he's going to make the arrangements. He's going to arrange it. You meet a person, you go to a place, and if you look back on your life, you say, my life's pretty good, but you know why my life's good? Because of the good I did. And the good I did is while the Rebbe fiat. It's a pele. It's mamish a pele. It's mamish a pele. And it's true today. It's not just true 50 years ago. It's true mamish today. If you look at your relatives, not over the course of 6 months, but over the course of 10 years or 20 years, you see how we can always say no. We have an option of being obnoxious. We could be a misnagid. But unless we're donkeys, he works us. He moves the pieces around. He arranges everything. He puts everything has to be in. The Rebbe found a way of using each one of us to serve him. And in serving him, we're better, we're bigger, we're happier, we're holier, we're everything good. Observe, and you'll see. Look at your married siblings. You don't see it over short intervals, but over long intervals, you see the Rebbe fear the Welt. It's a remarkable thing. And it's not an achama of Zayin Nadir. It was such a difficult time those years. It was so hard. It was so hard. The years before Gimel Tammuz was very mishachistish, but they kochte Mashiach, Hazoi. But we were all temporary nuts. We got through that period because we were all cuckoo. We were out of our minds. And after Gimel Tammuz, there was fighting in Lubavitch for a few years. And the fighting was very personal, was very angry. And if I had to describe the fight was between the people who said you must be happy, and the people who said how dare you be happy. That's the way I looked at it. The people said you must be happy, how else can you live? And the people said you're not allowed to be happy. It's like Gimel Tammuz, how can you be happy? And we figured it out. We in Lubavitch, we the people, are one nation. There is one Lubavitch. And it's such a miracle. Look at Bobiv, look at Satmir, look at everybody else. And they have Rebbe's Kleimisht, Neshamas Beguf. And look at us, we the people. Because we have a Rebbe. A Lebedik Rebbe. Okay, enough. Now girls, like I said, this is my third class on what's called Pesach by the Rebbe. And like I said to you before, it's really odd to me that I should share with you Pesach by the Rebbe that I didn't witness. It's just stories that I heard. So in the last 2 periods, I did a few things. I talked about the Rebbe sending Matzah to Eretz Yisrael. I talked a lot about the Fabrengen of Yir Aleph Nissen. I talked about the Rebbe even selling chametz and burning chametz. I'm holding by the Rebbe giving our Matzah Erev Pesach. But before I do this, I want to go back to something which I did touch on, but I didn't give enough attention, and I do want to give it attention, okay? So I'm going out of order a little bit. The Rebbe, how do you say this nicely? The Rebbe, I heard this from a Stagnish Yeshiva, was a very private man. And that's how it stayed. He was the most public figure in the world, but the Rebbe was still, and is still, a very, very private person. One of the most overt examples of this privacy was how the Rebbe celebrated his Yom HaLedes. I mentioned to the girls last week that the President of the United States, called up the Lubavitcher Rebbe on the phone to wish him happy birthday. Himself. And the Rebbe sent a message that at a birthday it's a time for pnimius, for introspection, and to work on himself and to grow. It's not a time for formalities, and he thanks the president very much for the call, but he didn't pick up the phone. The president of the United States, either 75 or 76, it was Gerald Ford. He was only a president for 2 years. Gerald Ford called up the Rebbe. I think he repeated the story at the Chabad dinner. He was never elected. He was the vice president, and then he lost to Jimmy Carter. But he called, imagine the president calls the Rebbe on the phone, the Rebbe says, I'm busy, take call back tomorrow, which of course he did not do. But the Aleph Nissen was a day that Rebbe commemorated privately. The first 20 years was only once a Fabrengen, only once. When the Rebbe turned 60, Tav Shin Chav Beis. Then the second Fabrengen was Tav Shin Lamed Aleph, 1971, when the Rebbe said what most of us would call, what's the Yud Aleph Nissen Maimah? What Maimah represents Aleph Nissen? B'yei Mashta Yosef. The Rebbe said that in 1971, when the Rebbe turned, he completed the 69th year. It happens to be a hard Maimah. I taught it over the weekend. I've learned it many times, but every time you learn it, you got to learn it again. There's no easy. It's not an easy Maimah. In Tafshin, when the Rebbe turned 69, it went to a 70th year. Then he fabrenged every Aleph Nissen for the next 15. From 1971, Tafshin Lamed Aleph to Tafshin Mem Hey, 1985. Mem Vav, the Rebbe didn't fabreng. Now, I was in California at the time. And the shmur that we heard, the rumor was that the Rebbe had been fabringing on television for a few years. All the big fabrengens, that means Vav Tishrei, Yutas Kislev, Yud Aleph Nissen, Yud Beis Tammuz, and Chaf Av were on cable television. I skipped it. Yud Shvat, yeah. Vav Tishrei, Yutas Kislev, Yud Shvat. The big one that was on television was Purim, because the Rebbe had Purim as private, Mishpach. Yud Aleph Nissen, Yud Beis Tammuz, and Chaf Av was on television. And at one point, the Rebbe said, the Rebbe didn't officially stop it. He let it stop. He didn't want to do it much. And the beginning of it was the Rebbe said, I'll bring the Shabbos closest to Yud Aleph Nissen. Let's say Yud Aleph Nissen was on a Sunday, for bringing Shabbos or something like that. And that was it. Mem Vav, there was no Fabrengen Yud Aleph Nissen. Mem Zayin was Fabrengen Yud Aleph Nissen. And Mem Ches, that was it. There was no more weekday Fabrengens. The weekday Fabrengen Nissen stopped. When the Rebbetzin passed away, the Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka passed away, there were no more weekday Fabrengens. The last weekday Fabrengen was Chamisha Asa B'Shvat Tov Shin Mem Ches. 35 years ago, Chamisha Asa B'Shvat, that means 2 B'Shvat for those who speak English, was the last weekday Fabrengen. It was 1 week to the day before the Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka was nostalgic, and the Rebbe stopped Fabrengen during the week altogether. Okay?
So the latest videos that we have
of the Rebbe sitting down and talking is Tov Mem Ches, right? Correct. So a friend of mine who's a real dedicated Shubas, he's one of those, he's very, very smart, and he remembers details, and he's very, very precise, says to me, Yud Aleph Nissen Tov Mem Vav, there's no Fabrengen. But the Rebbe started to give dollars. Oh. And that lasted almost 6 whole years. And dollars was amazing. So the Rebbe closed one door and opened another. The Rebbe stopped Fabrengen Yud Aleph Nissen, and the Rebbe started giving dollars. It was almost 2 whole years when the Rebbe passed away. The Rebbe started giving dollars. Now you must understand that when the Rebbe gave dollars, the Rebbe didn't make an announcement. Excuse me. On Sunday you should all line up. He just walked out of his room and started handing out dollars. That's what happened. So okay, the Rebbe's giving dollars Yud Aleph Nissen. So the Rebbe does a lot of interesting things. Yeah, but he came on the next Sunday and gave dollars. And he came out the Sunday after that, and he gave dollars. And at some point, people realized that he's coming out every Sunday, you understand? So Yevon Dalan. So in the beginning, dollars was very informal. There wasn't a lot of people. It was quick. He went out, he handed out dollars, went back to his room. And when people chaptzach what's going on, so then they started to line up and to bring people. I mean, dollars could last 6-7 hours. I tell people all the time, girls, you can get a dollar from the Rebbe, you can watch the video and experience the mind. There's a lot of parts of dollars that you can experience. There's one piece of dollars you will never have. The waiting in line. You waited 4 hours for 10 seconds with the Rebbe, 5 seconds with the Rebbe. Bracha v'atzlacha next, bracha v'atzlacha. The waiting for dollars, which was nuts. I mean, if you waited in 770 with Ishkafelach, you have to understand, they had to have a line for men and a line for women. So the downstairs shul with mechitzas every Sunday. There was the men's lines, like you have those back and forths, and the women's lines, the back and forths. And if it was the summer and it was nice weather, the men could wait outside, the women could wait inside. But you waited for hours. In front of the Rebbe's house, where did you wait? on the street. I remember one year, my birthday, it must have been Memches Memtes. It was pouring rain, pouring. By the time I walked into the Rebbe, I was wet to my skin. I was so wet. I don't know if I was cold, but the part of dollars that you cannot possibly experience is the waiting in line. But the Rebbe gave dollars. Dollars was a gilui she'ein kamoyo. The Rebbe would stand there as long as there were people and give a dollars. Bracha v'atzlocha, bracha v'atzlocha, bracha v'atzlocha. He looked at you, and he gave you dollars, bracha v'atzlocha. And I always tell people that, again, I've heard people tell me that I'm wrong, but my attitude was how I was raised. The key in the meeting with the Rebbe is the touching of the eyes. Boom. It's not it's the Rebbe looking at you. And the Rebbe first looked at you, and then he gave you the dollar. And Bekesh Bracha was the same thing. He would look at you, and then he'd look down at your cup and say, L'chaim v'lebracha. But you were very confused. You were also very nervous. And oftentimes, when the Rebbe was looking at you, you were looking at the dollar. And then when you finished looking at the dollar, you looked up at the Rebbe was not looking at you, he was looking at your hand. You had to halt cup. That the first thing that does, he looks at you, and then he gives the bracha v'atzlach. He looks at you. That look, which is very quick, a fraction of a second, was a meeting, was a conversation. It was a complete conversation. The eyes, the Rebbe would look at you, and he looked through you. I read an essay, a Yuman from a very smart Yid who came to the Rebbe in 1971, 72, and he watched the Fabrengen, and he writes, Yesh loy cheshbon im kol echad ve'echad. He says he's watching the Rebbe say, L'chaim, 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 L'chaim. And he has business with everybody. Every person he looks at, you could see that he knows that person knows the Rebbe, and the person knows that the Rebbe knows him, and the Rebbe knows the person knows that he knows him. And the Rebbe, every time they look in your direction, it was a conversation. I am telling you this from my experience. Every time the Rebbe looked at me, there was a conversation. Didn't last very long, but the conversation was really about me, not about him. Du haltst, du lernst, du davenst, du bist wie du darfst. And the Rebbe looked at me differently when I was in a better place, Baruch Nias. The Rebbe looked at me differently when I wasn't in a place, Baruch Nias. I always tell people I was never holier in my life than when I was a chassan. I once went to Keshel Bracha, Shabbos Neach, Matzah Bereishos Neach, Tafshin Nun. I got wine from the Rebbe, and the Rebbe followed me with his eyes all the way till I couldn't see me anymore. I never had such an experience. And one of my friends said, the Rebbe followed you with his eyes. I said to him, I know, and I used to know why. The Rebbe's, how did the Rebbe know? He looked at me, and when I wasn't beside, he also looked at me, but I knew from his look that he was disappointed. Never angry, disappointed, sad. But the Rebbe's eyes were a conversation. And my generation, who didn't have yachidus, and because of our smart mashpiyim, we didn't really write honestly to the Rebbe. We didn't write pneumistic letters. Most of us didn't write pneumistic letters. Our Rebbe was with the eyes. And the dollars, Teshel Bracha, whenever the Rebbe looked at you, it was a real connection, and a real inspiration, and a real kick in the pants, and a real Inyan, Begashmis of Eruchnis. So this is when it started. Yud Aleph Nissen, the Rebbe started to give dollars. I think it's a fascinating little detail, a nugget. Tafshin Mem Vav, the Rebbe started to give dollars Yud Aleph Nissen, and he did it for almost 6 years. And people came from the whole world.
I have a dollar from Achei.
Fine, but that was from the Fabrengen. From the Fabrengen. In other words, your father or your mother, whoever was nice enough to give you $1, the Rebbe at the end of that Fabrengen gave dollars. But you must understand that in those years, the Rebbe didn't give you dollars himself. He gave it to the Tankisten. It's strange. But the Fabrengens, the Rebbe gave dollars to the Tankisten. The Bachrim, when I'm Mitzvah, used to get dollars from the Rebbe. The women, the Rebbe used to send Rabbi Weinberg, Olav Shalom, with a big stack to go upstairs, and he would give the dollars to, I think, to Mariasha Gerelik, and that's how the women got their dollars. But the men, the Rebbe would give through the Tankisten. But when the Rebbe gave dollars upstairs, he met you. He handed you the dollar. That was a whole different inyan.
What did the Mashpim tell to write to the Rebbe?
Mashpim said, don't waste the Rebbe's time. Don't give the Rebbe Agmas Nefesh. Hello, my name is Yeshua ben Rechel. I'm alive, sei gesund. That's what he wrote. The biggest mistake of my life. The biggest... formal. You have to understand, the Rebbe is very personal. The Rebbe has thousands of chassidim. You go to the oil. You have a personal relationship with him. And you know what? He has a personal relationship with you. It's hard to understand because how many people can a person hold in his head? The Rebbe didn't have that limitation at all. It was very personal. It was very pneumistic. It was very individual. Me and the Rebbe had our relationship. If I had asked for more, I would have gotten more. It's that simple. If you give mont, the Rebbe gave what you asked for, but we didn't ask. I'm talking about a young pnimi. I'm not asking they should give me a hug. Hadracha, hira. Our mashpiyim who told us to do this went to the Rebbe Yechidus years earlier, and the Rebbe told them what to do, what to learn, and how to daven, and how to weiter.
The Rebbe would be the mashpiyah?
Yeah. Rebbe was a Rebbe. Rebbe's not a Rebbe. Yes, but absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Anyway, so Yidaf Nissen was the beginning of dollars. Dollars is a gilu she'en kamayu. It's really extraordinary. And of course, if you know dollars, very, very often, all the good stories happen when the Rebbe called you back, you know? When you walked by, the Rebbe called you back. That's when they were the Isis and Meisim. All the delicious stories. The Rebbe called you back. Okay, so I just wanted to throw that in. I didn't want to miss this inyan, so I'm mentioning it now. And of course, a little later on, started also the inyan from the Kuntesim. Right? I think the first Kuntes was Memches, where the Rebbe gave out material to learn. The first time the Rebbe gave a Kuntes, the Rebbe said he's giving it only to people who could learn. It means boys above 12 and girls above 11. The Rebbe gave the Kuntes. He gave the Kuntes Echolzu. He stood in the same place where he gave dollars. I told this to you. And he gave each one of us a kuntris, and he didn't say Beracha v'atzlacha. He said, Atzlacha dikan lenin. He told each person, I want you to learn this. I want you to learn this. The next time of kuntris was after the Rebbetzin passed away, and now it was Anosham Noshav Ataf. Hakel doesn't know any distinctions. Baby's got kuntresim. Baby's got tanyas from the Rebbe. Nothing. By Dalvos, the Rebbe said Beracha v'atzlacha, Sunday morning. But the Rebbe gave dollars at night after a sicha, or gave a kunteris, the Rebbe just gave it to you. It was much faster.
What time did Daven start?
That's a great question. Daven started after Shachris. So when was Shachris? Before the Rebbe passed away, the Rebbe davened Shachris b'Yechidus. So when was Shachris? Could be 12 o'clock, could be 1 o'clock. After Shachris, Daven started. Once the Rebbe passed away, the Rebbe davened late. Okay, I didn't tell it to you, I don't need no trouble. Okay, the Rebbe davened whenever he wanted to daven. The Rebbe was a religious Jew, I promise you. He knew the Shulchan Aruch, he knew the Pnimis of the Shulchan Aruch, he was an Elach Yid, but the Rebbe often davened late. Once the Rebbe passed away, so it was after Shachris, the Rebbe davened after Shachris. The thing that's so crazy about dollars was that in the beginning, the Rebbe used to go to the oil twice a month. When I was growing up, I heard that the very beginning of the CS he went once a month. But when I was growing up, the Rebbe went to oil twice a month. Erev Rish Chodesh and Tezvov. Every month went twice a month. Sometimes he went 3 times, but officially went twice a month. Around the same time, the Rebbe started giving dollars. Oil changed from twice a month to twice a week. Every Sunday and Thursday, the Rebbe went to the oil. So imagine this: the Rebbe davens Shachris, gives dollars for 3, 4, 5 hours, then goes to the mikveh after dollars, then goes to the oil, comes back from the oil and davens mincha, and the whole time he's fasting. He stood in his feet how many hours giving dollars? Who knows? Stood in his feet by the oil how many hours? Who knows? He was fasting. He only drank before oil. In the winter time, you had really weird situations, and please don't ask me any questions. The Rebbe could finish giving dollars. It was dark outside. It was night. 4:30, 4:45, it was dark. What did the Rebbe do? He went to the mikveh. What did the Rebbe do after the mikveh? He went to the oil. The oil came back, daven mincha. What time? 8 o'clock at night, 4 hours after the shkia. But the Rebbe could have daven mincha before oil. It was dark, right? But the Rebbe daven mincha after oil. That's what it was. There was shachris, dollars, oil, mincha. It didn't matter what time it was. I remember once, I was married already, and it was late for mincha. Let's say the shkia was 8 o'clock, so it was 8:20. So I figured, okay, I'll go into 7:70. I'll wait for them to come back from the oil. That was the Rebbe's mincha. Then we come back 12:30. 4 hours I hung around 7:70 waiting for mincha. 12:30 came downstairs, daven mincha, no problem. Daven ma'ariv, no problem. Shalom Yisrael. For the Rebbe, a big minyan.
How do people know?
I have a secret for you. We considered it an honor for us and in our best interest We weren't doing the Rebbe a favor. And so the Rebbe worked Sunday like crazy. And by the way, I want you to know, and maybe I shouldn't tell this to you, it's true that the Rebbe, when the Rebbe finished giving dollars, he would soak his hand in ice water. It was hard. His hand was swollen. It's not so easy to do this 3,000 times. Every Sunday after dollars, the Rebbe had to soak his hand in ice water. The Shtel Zachfor, the Rebbe finishes oil, dollars. He doesn't have time for his hand. He has to go to the oil. After oil is Mincha Ma'ariv, then he can actually put his hand in ice water. So different people suggested to the Rebbe that he should change oil to Monday and Thursday. The Rebbe's giving dollars on Sunday, so instead of going to the oil Sunday and Thursday, you should go to the oil Monday and Thursday. So the Rebbe didn't want to change. The Rebbe told somebody, Zalman Jaffe asked, a few people asked. Benjamin Klein once told me about this. I wish I would remember the details. Benjamin's the Rebbe's secretary. He's my uncle, and he told me about this, and I don't remember what he said. But he said to me that the Rebbe refused. Anyway, 1 year, after Rosh Hashanah, maybe it was Nun Aleph, the Rebbe apparently was Mataneded, because after that, the Rebbe started giving dollars Monday and Thursday. So at least he didn't do two standing a whole day on his feet things in one day. So he would go.
$dollars on Monday?
So they gave dollars on Sunday. And went to the oil Mondays and Thursdays. That became the Seder. Mondays and Thursdays. Well, he was home. His wife didn't bother him too much. She was a very, very good wife. She didn't need a lot of attention. Or at least she didn't ask for it.
But didn't
The Rebbe spent
once a day?
half an hour a day.
Yeah.
Half an hour a day.
Where?
And they had no children. The Mesiras Nefesh of the Rebbetzin, we push it, don't understand. Not we don't appreciate, we don't understand. The Mesiras, they sat together and they ate dinner together. And they talked. The Rebbe used to bring everything home. The Rebbetzin knew everything going on in Lubavitch. The Rebbetzin knew everything happening. The Rebbe came home and he gave the Rebbetzin an update, everything going on in 770. The Rebbetzin knew everything. The Rebbetzin knew people. A Yid came to America to see the Rebbe. And this is actually the Rebbe's mother. The Rebbe's mother asked a woman who she is. And she said, my name is so-and-so, and I come from Yerushalayim. And she said, yeah, my son told me you're here. The Rebbe went home every night. The Rebbetzin was kept apprised of what the Rebbe was doing. She was very much in the loop. Not just of the Askanas, but even private people. The Rebbe came home and told the Rebbetzin everything that's going on. I'll tell you a nice little story. There was a Yid who lived in the house, his name is Shalom Gansberg. I'm talking about the Rebbe's communication, okay? He lived in the house with the Rebbetzin together. He sat at the table with them for dinner. He said them on he sat by their Seder for 10 years or more. So one night they're sitting down to eat, and of course the Rebbetzin wouldn't pick up their fork until he sat down with his piece of food. And the three of them are eating, and the Rebbe turns and looks at the Rebbetzin. Doesn't say a word. And the Rebbetzin says to Shalom Gansberg, "Was macht Chaim Lieberman? How is Chaim Lieberman doing?" So Shalom Gansberg says, "So he's doing okay, yeah." So the Rebbe looks at the Rebbetzin, doesn't say a word. And the Rebbe says, "How do you know?" She says, "Well, because he called and they gave us an update." The Rebbe looks at the Rebbetzin and says, "Was that today or yesterday?" So the Rebbe says, "Was it today or yesterday?" He says, "It was yesterday." So the Rebbe says, "How do you know what's going on today?" And again, the Rebbe doesn't say a word. He looks at the Rebbetzin asks the question, and he answers it, and then the Rebbe looks at the Rebbetzin, and then the Rebbe says, the Rebbe looks at the Rebbetzin, and the Rebbetzin tells him, go call right now and see how he's doing. So the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin had different kinds of communication. It could be they didn't have to talk everything out. But the Rebbetzin knew everything going on. The Rebbetzin knew everything going on in Lubavitch. Everything. Everything. Anything happened with the shluchim, the Rebbetzin knew everything. The Rebbe kept her involved in her quiet way. Okay, now, the next agenda on the item on the agenda is Matzah. Okay, and the way the Matzah speech starts is as follows. 770 is famous for its lines. You heard about this Tishrei time, I told this to you. 770 lines. Vakesh Bracha was a line. Dollars was a line. Kuntreisim was a line. Matzah was a line. Lulav was a line. And some of these lines went down Eastern Parkway till Brooklyn, up Brooklyn till President, and down President till Kingston. Some of these lines were snaked. It snaked. In other words, the end of the line was almost where the beginning of the line was. A big akafer. And everybody stood in line. Gestanden. Shoyes nacharand. In line. You said Tillim, you were nervous, you fidgeted, you couldn't look at your phone because you didn't own one. So you never had to talk to the guy near you. Shalom Aleichem, what's your name? He said, if I had a phone, I would ignore you, but I don't have a phone, so let's talk. So some lines were very fast, and some lines were not so fast. The fastest line by far was Pedienis, Panim. It was very, very fast. I described it to you Tishrei time. They would take a pan from two people. Each one got a half of bracha. It was very fast. So a line of panim, you could be in front of what is now Gambos. It was a different story 20 years ago, and 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And when the Rebbe started taking B'nai, in 20 minutes you were by the Rebbe. Okay, but Lekach, that was a 3-hour wait. Because Lekach, they used to literally look at you and decide how much cake he's giving you. A whole piece, a half a piece, 3/4 of a piece, a third of a piece. The Rebbe had cheshbonis, the Lekach, and the Rebbe gave it with his fingers. The Rebbe didn't use napkins. The Lekach was pre-cut. The Rebbe used to break the Lekach and give you a bracha, give you a Lekach and say, L'shon Teva Mesukah. I could still hear the saf of the Rebbe's Mesukah. The Rebbe had a little bit of a lisp. So the Mesukah was very strong. L'shon Teva Mesukah. It was very easy. The Mesukah was especially sweet. Look at the Lekach. But the hardest line by far was Matzah, for a number of reasons. And the ikar reason was because the Rebbe didn't give Matzah till the Matzah was baked. And the Matzah was baked Erev Pesach Achei Temimim. They couldn't start baking it till 1 o'clock. Now in the earlier years, the Rebbe's Matzah baker was in Manhattan. So it had to be brought to Brooklyn. And even the ladies, the Matzah bakers on Albany Avenue, had to be brought to 770, packaged brought to 770. And the Rebbe didn't give matzah till after Mincha. Mincha is 3:15. So if Pesach comes in 6 o'clock, from the time the Rebbe starts to give matzah till he finishes giving matzah, it's less than 3 hours. It's 2.5 hours, or 7 o'clock, whatever it is. And people came from the whole tri-state area, as far away as Connecticut, and Philadelphia, and Boston. Boston is a 4-hour ride, maybe Boston not, but people came, the minute to get home to the shkir, to get a shtick of matzah from the Rebbe for the Seder. So there was mamish 2 lines, it was crazy. There was the official line, which I stood on, which came up through the door that Rabbi Groner's office now is. It was in those days it was the Weiber show. You know where the driveway goes down in the back of 770? There's 2 doors that go to the basement, and the third that goes upstairs. That used to be the door to the Weiber show. And the Yichud room was there. Everything has changed. You walked up those steps, and you made a right, and you went into the Gan Eden HaTachton from that door. You passed by the Rebbe's room, you got matzah, you walked out. But then there was the front door of 770. There were as many people in the unofficial line as there were in the official line. Any shliach, any rov, anybody who was either out of town or was taking matzah from many people. So the line was nuts. It was just cuckoo. I remember. You waited and waited, didn't even budge, because all the people that came the other way went first. And the Rebbe, some people the Rebbe gave pieces of matzah, some people the Rebbe gave a whole matzah, some people gave a whole package of matzah. 1 pound, 2 pounds, it was all mit acheshbon. There's one of the Goldsteins does a little narration from the Rebbe giving matzah in Esh Yod. He says a very interesting thing. Until much later in the Nesias, to the late Lameds, the Rebbe did everything himself. Later on, Label Groner used to help, but the Rebbe used to, you could see videos, picking up the boxes, moving them here, moving them there, opening them up, taking out a package, and looking at you and giving you a matzah. I got matzah from the Rebbe only as a child. Because after Lamed Ches, the Rebbe stopped giving matzahs. I'm going to explain in a moment. So my father got matzah, we would go with him. In those days, the children went to the Rebbe. Before Lamed Ches, we went for everything. We went to every Keshe Baracha, went for every Lekach you wouldn't think of missing. After Lamed Ches, they told us don't go, you don't want to bother, waste the Rebbe's time. But Nachashtus. But I'll leave that for another time. I'll complain about that tomorrow. But the Rebbe used to give you 2 pieces of matzah, I think. I think he gave 2 pieces of matzah. Maybe a child they gave 1 piece. I think everybody got 2 pieces of matzah. If a person was married, they got a bigger piece and a smaller piece. But you got a shtick of matzah. And the Rebbe used to look at you and decide how labor intense. Every person would look at you and decide how much matzah to give you. He would break off a piece of matzah and give it to you. And I don't know what he would say to me. I don't remember what he would say. So that's how the matzah went. And it was the first line that the Rebbe stopped. And it made sense. Because there was so little time, and because there was so much pushing. I mean, how many stories are there that people didn't make it home for Pesach, and they made the Seder on the side of the road with, all they had was the Rebbe's matzah, It happened many times. There's a woman who was a girl from Machon, and Nussi Gerari told her, you're going to go get matzah from the Rebbe, I don't know how a girl got into 770, but she got into 770. Go to the airport, get on the plane, and fly to Buffalo, and I'll wait for you in the airport. I'll pick you up, we'll get home before the Shkia, and we'll have matzah by the Seder for the college kids on the campus in University of Buffalo, State University at New York in the 1970s. Anyway, she got to 770, she pushed her way through somehow. She got her pack of matzah, I'm going from a garage from Buffalo, we gave her matzah, and she got into a cab, and she got to the airport, and she missed her plane. So the matzah stayed in New York. I think she went to the post office and she mailed it. And a lot of people, it was a whole shtick. The post office closed at 5 o'clock. And there was another bookend. In other words, on the one hand, the Rebbe does not give until 3:30, 3:45. On the other hand, the post office closes at 5 o'clock. So you had to get in there with enough time to get to the post office and package it that it shouldn't become crumbs, put it in the mail and send it. Sometimes the matzah went overseas, California, England. People used to go to the Rebbe, get matzah at a Pesach and mail it. And there's a lot of interesting stories with the Rebbe's matzahs arriving at very, very interesting times. So there was a lot of pressure. So this lady, her name is Mrs. Wordy, she tells the story herself. She ended up stuck in New York, and the Rebbe came to the Seder at Machon. The Rebbe went downstairs to the basement, went to the kitchen, he looked around, and the Rebbe said to the girls, with a lot of girls, in Mr. Shem next year, you should each make a Seder in your own room. All the girls who were in that room, the next year made a Seder in their own home, including her. So she said, that's the story. Next year, make a Seder in your own home, and it's a very big bracha. And kachava, that's exactly how it happened. Anyway, but the Rebbe stopped the line Lamed Ches. The matzah line stopped Lamed Ches because it was untenable. So the Rebbe started to give matzah to the koilel. After mincha, the koilel would line up. Rabbi Heller was the Reisha, koilel was in the head, and the Rebbe gave the matzah to Rabbi. The Rebbe gave 2 pounds of matzah, and he went downstairs. Now I don't know what the rules were, but I was in koilel one year. And I took a whole matzah that year. I was told I'm allowed. I decided I was told I'm allowed. And I also saved the paper. I still have that paper. I use it for my kaida. The piece of paper that the Rebbe gave me with the 2 pounds of matzah, I saved. Now, how much time did it take to give a 2 pounds of matzah in 770? About 5 minutes. So I had my matzah, I had my paper, I gave everybody matzah, and 5 minutes later I left. Rabbi Groner comes downstairs and says, wait a minute, we're all the koilel guys. He says, I finished my matzah. He says, go upstairs and get more. The Rebbe didn't give you matzah to give her 2 pounds of matzah and go home. You're supposed to stay there till Yom Tif. If your matzah finishes, you go upstairs, you get 2 more pounds from the Rebbe. Not that the Rebbe would give it to you, the mosquitoes would give it to you, and you go back downstairs and continue giving the Rebbe's matzah. But that was the way it was. So the line was suddenly very quick. The whole Erev Pesach pressure, which gave that piece of matzah, was lifted, it was gone. We missed that. But the Rebbe still gave the shluchim of the people. Those people who came from out of town, who were taking matzah for a community, they continued going by the Rebbe. You can see the videos, and they would tell the Rebbe where they're coming from. The Rebbe gave them a pound or 2 pounds, or whatever the case is, and so on. And then, of course, there were the miyuchasim, there were the special people. The miyuchasim, Leil Yom Tif, after Ma'ariv, people would line up outside the Rebbe's door, and the Rebbe would open his door and give people matzah. But the people who got the matzah the night of the Seder, they got from the Rebbe a whole matzah. It was a special schus. Rabbi Chadakov got a matzah, a whole matzah, a ganze matzah. And I think they went both nights, the first night and the second night. Before the Seder, they would stand there by the Rebbe's door and they would give him a matzah. Now, what do you do if it's Shabbos? I don't know what you do, but the Rebbe would give them each a matzah at night after Ma'ariv to certain people, to the miyuchasim. Yeah. How they got it home, davon fragen a historian, but that was the Messias. There's a lot of crazy stories with matzah. One of the stories with matzah was that there was a Yid whose name was Abari 11, and the Rebbe used to give him matzah every year. The Rebbe sent it through a shliach, and this shliach would take matzah for a few people. He took 3 matzahs, and then the Rebbe gave him one for himself also. And one year he came to the Rebbe gave him a matzah less. When the Rebbe gives you don't argue with the Rebbe, you took it. Rabbi 11 passed away after the Rebbe gave the matzahs, but before the matzahs would arrive in Yisrael. The Rebbe Pasha didn't give him a matzah, and he passed away before Pesach. So by the Rebbe, everything was, he knew everything, Where are you going to be for the Seder? In Bridgeport. You'll be in Bridgeport? And the Rebbe gave him the name of a different city. He said, I'm going to Bridgeport. You're in Bridgeport? That's what you're going to do. Bottom line is the guy was Pesach. Wherever the Rebbe said he was going to be, not where he planned to be. But the stories are extraordinary where the Rebbe is giving matzah. Okay, now of course after Mincha we say Korban Pesach. And by night, the night of the Haggadah, the Seder was that after Ma'ariv, the Rebbe would visit the different public Sederim. The Rebbe would go to the yeshiva where the Bachrim ate, and all the Bachrim would stand respectfully in their places before Kiddush. The Rebbe would walk in, the Rebbe would look around, and it was very orderly. The Bachrim all made sure that it was neat and clean. They knew the Rebbe was coming. They made sure it was very, very mesudar. He would look around, and one year the Rebbe asked where are the candles. They wanted to have boys by themselves have to bench licht. People don't realize it. And the licht is supposed to be in the same room where you eat. You're supposed to have them different kiddush. So the Rebbe asked where the candles were. Then the Rebbe went to the kitchen, and the cook, whose name is Mrs. Nemoitin, she waited a whole year for this. And the Rebbe walked into the kitchen. The Rebbe knew her. She was an almana forever. She was alone her whole life. And the Rebbetzin was a personal friend of hers. She was very close to the Rebbetzin. And the Rebbe would say to her nice words about the fact that she's looking after the Bachrim and how much it means. And she lived from that visit to her kitchen a whole year. They would look around and tell her everything is beautiful and everything is neat and everything is clean and everything is Pesach, and she had a lot of nachas from it. Later on, she was the cook at the Machon. It was the same story. When the Rebbe would come, she was in the kitchen, and they walked into the kitchen, and the Rebbe would say, "Thank you for looking after my daughters." So, of course, in the beginning, the Rebbe went to the yeshiva. Then the Rebbe went to Adar Atera, which was Bali Tshuva yeshiva. Then the Rebbe started going to Machon also, which was the girls' school. And then, for those of you who know the history of Lubavitch, the Rebbe used to go to the Persian program. In the late 70s, early 80s, there were 1,000 Iranian kids who were snuck out of Iran after Khomeini became to power, and they were living here in Crown Heights. For a few years, we had mamish Iranian schools and everything, until these kids grew up. Some of them went into Lubavitcher Rebbe, a lot of them left. But when the Iranians living in Crown Heights, they had their own Seder. The Rebbe said they have to dafki give them rice. Sfardim eat kidneys, they should dafki give them rice. And the Rebbe went to all four Stadim. He went first, I guess, Adar Atera and the Iranians was in the same building, on Eastern Parkway. And then he would go to President Street, 1414, where the Bachrim's dormitory was. And then he would walk to Machon, which is on the way home, on President Street between Kingston and Brooklyn.
The dorm.
The dorm, yes. And the Rebbe went into each place, he went into each kitchen, he would look around, and he would make any corrections if he thought corrections needed to be made. He would go into the kitchen and he would be mevarech. He would thank the cook, whoever was in charge. Yankel Hecht, J.J. Hecht, used to walk around with the Rebbe. He was in charge of Adar Atera. He was in charge of the Iranians. He was in charge of Machon. So he was one of the people who accompanied the Rebbe. So one year, the Rebbe went to the yeshiva. By the way, I just want to say this before I tell you this, that for the Bachrim, this was a big situation. Because for 20 years, the Rebbe made a Seder upstairs, and the Bachrim wanted to participate in the Rebbe Seder. So the minute the Rebbe walked out of that kitchen, the Bachrim knocked off a Seder like you have no idea. They made Kiddush, and they Kaddish, Orchas, Kapas, Yachas, Magid, Ochzah, Moitzi, Matzah, Mora, Kiddush, Orchas. They went through it. The Bachrim used to arrive in the Rebbe's apartment sometimes before the Rebbe. They would knock off the whole Haggadah in half an hour. And it happened more than once or twice that the Bacha threw up the whole situation. The wine with the matzah with the mother. You eat so much food, especially in the olden days when we had unleaded the wine was like gasoline, and it was very strong and it tasted terrible. And the Bachrim used to eat so quick to get on time to the Rebbe Seder. But you didn't budge till the Rebbe came. When the Rebbe came, everything was neat. It was before Kaddish. As soon as the Rebbe walked out, the Bachrim made an express through the Haggadah. They would get to Beirach. Once they got to Achei Temimim, they would go to they would finish the Haggadah in the Rebbe's apartment. They wanted to witness the Rebbe's Seder, which I'll talk about with the next group. But I just want to say this: that the Rebbe was walking from the yeshiva to Machon, and he said to Rabbi Hecht, "It's the Gechaim. Now I'm going home." Machon has the Rebbe's mother's name. It's the Gechaim. Anyway, the Rebbe stopped going to the public study Tafshin Mem Aleph. It was the last time. But Derech HaTeva, the reason was the Rebbe Pashut physically couldn't take that walk. It's not a very long walk. It's not a very long walk. It's from 770 halfway down Eastern Parkway towards Albany, back to Kingston, up Kingston to President. It's on the corner of President and Kingston, and walk home. The Rebbe Pashut could not walk those steps. In 1982, was the Rebbe Pasha couldn't walk even such a short distance.
At what point did he stop?
And the Rebbe stopped walking home Shabbos the following year. By Mem Beis, the Rebbe stopped walking home. So it was a short period of time, a few months, maybe a year, where the Rebbe was in 770 a whole Shabbos, and the Rebbe was by herself on President Street. It was very, very, very painful. So Zalman Garari built in the back of the library where there used to be the old Tashlich. Now Tashlich is behind the building. The Tashlich is behind the library. Zalman Garari built a few rooms, and they were literally the private residence of the Rebbe and the Rebbitzin. And the Rebbe would come there. The Rebbitzin would come there right before Shabbos. She would leave right after Shabbos and go back to President Street. And on Shabbos and Yom Tov, the Rebbe and the Rebbitzin were together, right next door to 770. So it made it much easier for the Rebbe and much more comfortable for the Rebbitzin. But Mem Aleph, the Rebbe still walked. Mem Beis, it pushed it physically, you can't gain. Now, girls, with the next group, I'm just telling you now, I'm going to be doing the Haggadah, the Seder by the Rebbe, which I never saw, but everyone talks about. So I'll talk about it also.